Hello, students. Today, I would just like to give you an introduction to the literary analysis. Since desperate times call for desperate measures, I'm doing this via screencast today instead of having a lecture in class. In our short time together today, I want to look at options for writing. I'd like to give you a quick quiz over the reading so that you can check your own understanding. And we'll talk about the upcoming writing assignment connected to the literary analysis as well. If we were meeting in class, I would ask you to talk about several issues related to writing a literary analysis. One of the key issues is how you should closely read a text or watch a movie when preparing for a literary analysis. Another issue is what options you have when you write a literary analysis. And a third is what is involved in the elements of a text in a classical literary analysis. You might just want to pause this video momentarily to think about how you would answer those questions before we continue. I will, though, address each one of them for you. So the first question is, how do you closely read a text or watch a movie? Well, as you might imagine, it involves a repeated watching of the text, a watching of the movie or a reading of a text. You'll have to do it repeatedly. The first time you read it through or watch it, you'll need to do so for understanding and to figure out an approach, maybe a thesis statement. Then after that, you look for a confirmation of the thesis and begin collecting evidence to support your thesis statement. So be prepared to read a text or watch a movie repeatedly for your upcoming assignment. Then you slow down enough to look for details, paying great attention to the details that you see and making note of those so that you can use them in your writing as evidence. The second question that we'll tackle today is what options you have for writing a literary analysis. And as the book mentioned, there are a number of options, including a thematic analysis in which you look at the major topics or themes of the book or movie. You can look at the authorship of a book or perhaps even the directorship of a movie to analyze how the author's personality or the author's background played a role in the construction of the text or film. You can also look at genre by analyzing the characteristics of the book or movie and putting those characteristics up against other movies from a similar genre or other books from a similar genre to show that it's fitting for its intended purpose. You can also examine the influence of a work by looking at how it has impacted society. This would be much harder to do and would involve more research than some other kinds of writing options, but it is a very valid and sometimes useful way to do a literary analysis. A fifth and final option is to write about the connections that you have when you, the connections that you see in society. And this may take something from the idea of a theme and apply it to society and culture, which will be one of your options for writing a literary analysis this time. So we'll talk about those options in just a few minutes. Another question I had for you is what is involved in an analysis of each of these elements of a text? When you do a classic literary analysis, you would typically take one or more of these elements and analyze them as you break apart the text or the movie. Plot, not surprisingly, is an element of the text that looks at the order of events in a story. Very often in a story, these follow a typical story curve. And in an analysis, you might plot where different events fall on that curve and how you would characterize different events in a story. If you analyze character in a literary analysis, you're likely looking at a single character or maybe the main character's in the story, and you're showing how those characters are portrayed. What is it about those characters that reveal the qualities that the author intends to give them? For example, if you look at setting in a literary analysis, you're evaluating the role of time and place in shaping the events that take place within the story. So it's not just a matter of identifying the setting, of identifying the time and place, but it's also looking at the role of time and place in the story itself. If you examine theme, then you're making a case for a particular theme playing an important thread throughout the story or the movie. So you would read through it or watch it once to identify what you see to be a theme, and then provide evidence for that theme, how the author or the producer highlights that theme through the book or the movie. And finally, if you look at language, you're evaluating dialogue in the movie or word choice. And this can be a very detailed, very close analysis, and may be more useful for shorter text rather than longer texts. So, all that being said, I assume that you've done some reading about the literary analysis already, since a chapter was assigned. And I'm also going to be sharing with you a short video produced by another organization on writing a literary analysis that gets into even more detail than I do. But I'd like to give you a quiz on the reading so that you can check your understanding. This, of course, is not going to be for a grade, but I would love you to pause the film or answer these questions as I read through them, and then I will share the answers as a way of reviewing other items related to a literary analysis. So the first question of this true and false question quiz is, to write a good literary analysis, you must carefully read or watch what you're analyzing. The answer to that is, of course, true. You can't write a good literary analysis with only a skimming of the text or only a quick watching of the movie. You'll need to dig into it in order to tease out themes or elements that you need in order to make a case for the thesis that you choose. The second question is, to write a good literary analysis, you should avoid the narrow focus of a central claim. The answer to this question is false. When you write a literary analysis, especially at this level, you should not be analyzing multiple parts of a book or a movie. Instead, you should have a central theme and stick to that theme as you're doing your analysis. A third question related to literary analysis is whether you should consider what others have written. This is also true. Although you should try to come to your own conclusions as you're beginning your analysis and develop your own thesis, it's never a bad idea to read, after you've had a chance to interact with the text yourself, what others feel or think about the text that you're working with. So do take some time to consider what others have written, and this can become part of the evidence that you use for the claim you're making. A fourth question is whether you should support your writing with meaningful quotes. And as you probably realize, the answer to this question is yes. However, the quotes that you use should be short and pithy, because it is assumed that those who read a literary analysis have likely already read the text. And that certainly will be the case for this particular writing assignment. You should keep your quotes very short. So please don't use any block quotes in this particular paper. Keep them short. A fifth question is whether you should carefully read assignment directions. This is probably one of my no-brainer questions, but yes, you should, because if you don't, you may waste time working on an assignment and may be going in a wrong direction and have to spend more time making up that work later. The sixth question is whether in writing a good literary analysis, you need to name the author of the work or the work itself. And although you might assume that since we will all be working on the same work, it's not necessary to name the author or the name of the work itself. I do want you to do that, and you should anytime you write a literary analysis. It's important to give the author's name, even if in the context it's understood who the author is. And you typically do that near the beginning of the literary analysis. A related question is whether you should provide dates about the author and their works. I ask this because this is something somewhat unique to a literary analysis. Because you're writing about the work of a particular author or producer, it is good, especially when you're writing about books, to provide the year of birth and the year of death of the author and the year in which the work was published. An eighth question is whether you should avoid formal style and personal reaction. The answer to this question is mixed. When you write a literary analysis for an undergraduate context, you're likely not going to be using formal style. Now, when you write literary criticism, then you do write in a very formal style that is often challenging to read. On whether or not you should avoid personal reaction, that may depend somewhat on the nature of your writing, but remember that this is not just an opinion. When you write an evaluation, an analysis of literature, you should provide not just how you feel about the work, but also what you think about the work, and provide an analysis of how you break down the work into different parts and what meaning you make of it. So it's more than just personal reaction. A ninth question is on the tense that is used to describe action. As you might recall from your reading, when you write about action in the literary analysis, you typically use present tense, not past tense. You talk about things that are happening as if they are happening when you write, rather than what the author wrote at the time. Now, this kind of goes against what is typically done for APA style, in which you report on what authors have written. And because of that, when you write this paper, I'll be happy if you use present tense reporting verbs as well as present tense verbs to describe action in the paper. The 10th question is whether you have a variety of options to choose from. And as we discussed earlier in this video, you certainly do. There are many options for you to follow. That being said, I would like to share with you the details of your upcoming literary analysis assignment. I'm going to give you 3 options for this assignment. One of them is a biblical analysis, in which I'd like you to write an essay that provides a scriptural perspective on what you read or watch. And I want you to apply scripture to that book or movie, focusing on an issue such as evil, innocence, justice, conscience, prejudice, punishment, or tolerance. The second option is a cultural application, in which you write an essay that provides an application to broader society of a lesson that's portrayed in the work. So you could show how lessons that are taught in the film or in the book could address contemporary issues. And a third is to do a classical literature analysis, in which you analyze a particular aspect of the work, whether that's plot or character, setting, theme, language, style, or videography. Finally, here are the nitty-gritty details. I'd like you to use APA with an abstract, writing at least 1,200 words. You should avoid summarizing the text or movie, but cite at least 3 sources, including the movie or book. Finally, don't forget to give recommendations for movies that we can watch for this assignment.